So in this lecture, we're going to go on and talk about some of the specific reactions that are so fast for benzylic and allylic positions. And we defined benzylic and allylic positions in a previous lecture. Recall that these are sp3 carbons that are going to be adjacent to an sp2 carbon of a pi system. And that adjacent pi system is going to be fundamental in affecting the reactivity of these benzylic and allylic positions. So benzylic and allylic atoms are very good at stabilizing and therefore affecting the reactivity of three different types of reactive intermediates. First of all, they stabilize cations, or if you have some benzylic or allylic position where there's an electron deficient atom, such as a carbocation, where there are three groups in a trigonal plane, and this carbocation, of course, has sp2 geometry with an empty p orbital. That empty p orbital can be stabilized by the pi system where you have filled p orbitals. And I'll draw here just general phasing. There are many molecular orbitals. You can phase these p orbitals different ways, but you can get conjugation into this p orbital since it's adjacent to that pi system.